And so he sits me down and he goes, hey, I'm going to leave Novell and I'm going to go join this little startup called Google. Well, back in 2000, 2001, like Google was like the 15th best search engine company. You know, there was Yahoo, Alta Vista, like all this stuff. And I'm thinking in my head, okay, two things. One is Google at the time was like a pretty small thing. It wasn't a big deal. And I'm thinking, dude, you're running a public company. What's going on? I'm also thinking, you're like the smartest dude on the planet. I'm like, all right, whatever.
Well, let's get into it, man. Maybe we start with bringing on Sterling and Tyler. Like, you've made some really incredible moves. Like, you've got an incredible team.
Oh, dude, the team is unbelievable. We're up to almost 30 people now, and what we were kind of looking for is we want I'll call it a differentiator, eclectic, complementary group of people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, investors, operators at all levels. And, you know, Sterling and Tyler, of course, they were super instrumental with Blake Murray at Divvy. And they're kind of hanging out in our offices and kind of doing some stuff. And we were having them engaged. And, like, we just said, hey, you guys ever thought about doing this side of the house? And they're like, yeah, we have. And so we're like, hey, would you be interested? And so Tyler joined us first. Sterling was kind of cycling through, do I start a company? Do I not start a company? Do I want to be an entrepreneur? And as he was doing that, we like had him engage with a couple of companies. We had him sit in on some pitch meetings, and I just he's amazing. Both of them are. So that's been great. And then Roy Banks, who also joined us.
Yeah.
You know,
former CEO of Weave. For those who don't know, Turk Weave. He was the CEO when it went public. Things like that.
Yeah. No, and that was like I think his fourth or fifth CEO gig. And he's like, I said, come and hang with us. And he's been amazing, kind of a mentor at a CEO level for a lot of our CEOs. So it's been great. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, the Pelion ecosystem is incredible.
You're very kind.
It really is incredible.
Yeah.
You've put together, I mean, the legacy of Pelion is really cool too. Did you get your start at Novell?
So out of college, WordPerfect.
Okay, WordPerfect first.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can explain what that is because my kids just kind of roll their eyes. And then Novell acquired WordPerfect, I want to say in 94.
Yeah.
And then in 96, Eric Schmidt joined us as our CEO.
Uh-huh.
One of the things he did was created a corporate venture fund. And I was given the opportunity to step in and run that thing in late 96, 97. $300 million, ran that from until 2002 when Eric left to go to Google.
Yeah.
Probably should have gone with him. But I wanted to be a VC. And then I joined my partner, Jim Dreyfus. If you guys all remember, Utah Venture's been around since 1986. That's when the firm started.
Jim Dreyfus is a legend.
Jim Dreyfus is a legend for sure.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I've been doing this since 2002 at Utah Ventures, UV Partners, Pelion, all the same firm, 3 different names.
Yeah, why did you move away from Utah Ventures? That's interesting.
Yeah, it was interesting. Jim had shortened it to UV Partners. I think just out of some confusion around, are you the economic development arm of the state of Utah? What do you are? So he'd kind of done that. And then the UV Partners, people thought we did like lights and UV stuff. And so we're like, all right, we got this totally identity crisis. So I want to say like 2010 or something, we just decided like, all right, let's just take a step back. Let's think about what we're doing here. And, Pelion wasn't the first name, but we got the URL. So there you go.
What does it stand for? What does it mean?
So Pelion is a mountain in Greece. If you're familiar with Jason and the Argonauts, going in search of the Golden Fleece, he cut down the timbers from Mount Pelion in Greece to build the ship to go in search of the Golden Fleece. So there's a whole story around that. It's a lot of fun, and we have a good time with it.
That's incredible. You mentioned something that we probably shouldn't gloss over, and that is there in the, mid to late 90s, 2 of maybe the 10 biggest tech companies in the world were in Provo, Utah, and WordPerfect and Novell.
Yeah.
Like those were big companies. And you mentioned that Eric Schmidt was the CEO of Novell when you came in, and he left to be the CEO of Google.
Right.
Like that, just that legacy is kind of crazy. But what did you learn from Eric? That must have been fascinating.
He's an amazing individual. So, Eric was the chief technology officer at Sun Microsystems, another one of the big bellwether companies. Yeah. And he got recruited to come over and be CEO of Novell. And I had the great privilege and opportunity. So Eric loved venture. And so when I was given the opportunity to run the venture fund, he was an amazing visionary, like everything you think he is in terms of the smartest dude on the planet. But he has this really entrepreneurial spirit. So I got to spend a lot of time with him because, one, he wanted to go see VCs. And first of all, all of them take a meeting with him. So I got to meet these amazing firms, Benchmark and Sequoia and NEA and Excel and Client. Like the list goes on because of Eric. So he was very much this, first of all, technology is going to change the world. Second of all, relationships matter. Yeah. And I learned that from a lot of different people, but, building trust, genuine trust relationships, I watched Eric do that over and over again. It was amazing. Interesting.
It's weird. I can't envision him living in Provo.
He did not. He lived in Atherton, actually, in the Bay Area.
And just fly in.
Yeah. Novell had a big office in San Jose, and it was interesting. They actually ran, I'd call it a shuttle. People used to call it a corporate jet, but they ran it between San Jose and Provo, and that's what he did.
Oh, I see.
So for me, I lived in Utah but worked in San Jose.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I'd catch the flight Monday morning, and I did this for 5 or 6 years. So let me just put a pause in here.
Yeah.
I have an amazing wife because she's we went house hunting a couple times in the Bay Area, and we looked at the prices of housing out there. And I remember saying to me after 30 minutes of house hunting, hey, commuting's working out real well for the kids and I. So I did that for 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Would you go Monday to Friday or
So I usually left Monday morning and I'd come home on Thursday.
Okay.
And I do that maybe 3 times a month. So 3 weeks out of the month. And I always had the flexibility to go back and forth. Technically I could go over in the morning and come back at night because they flew in and out of Provo.
Yeah.
But I'd just stay over there and, full credit to my wife and my great kids because all they saw was, hey, Delta and Marriott are going to pay for some great vacations for us because Dad's flying. It was fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah. This was before FaceTime and all that kind of stuff, smartphones.
Oh, yeah.
So
no Zoom, no anything like that.
Dial-up was what it was all about back then.
Did you talk to Eric as he was thinking about going to Google? That must have been so fascinating. And at the time, wasn't it kind of viewed as a pretty risky decision by him?
Well, so absolutely. I remember having the conversation. So I got this phone call. So my office in San Jose, we were on the same floor. I was just at one end of the building. He was at the other end. And his assistant, Pam Shore, she's amazing. She used to call me all the time and say, Eric needs to talk to you. And that either meant he was headed to see a VC, he had just committed to invest into a company, and I needed to figure it out. So that's what I'm thinking. And so she calls me. I wander down there. This is kind of late 2001. And keep in mind, Novell's a public company, so no one wants this out in the public realm. And so he sits me down. And he goes, hey, I'm going to leave Novell, and I'm going to go join this little startup called Google. Well, back in 2000, 2001, Google was the 15th best search engine company. There was Yahoo, Alta Vista, all this stuff. And I'm thinking in my head, okay, 2 things. One is Google at the time was a pretty small thing. It wasn't a big deal. And I'm thinking, dude, you're running a public company. What's going on? I'm also thinking, you're the smartest dude on the planet. I'm all right, whatever. So he does that. And I was so conflicted between, really, that's what you want to go do, to there must be something there.
Yeah.
And sure enough, there was something there.
Yeah, that is unbelievable. How did Sergey and Larry know about Schmidt?
So Kleiner was one of their investors. If you look at all the Vinod and all those guys from Kleiner, they're all Sun alumni. So Eric had worked with them at Sun. So they knew exactly. So the investors knew who Eric was. Sergey and Larry first of all, like for those guys, you've got to have a lot of intellectual horsepower, which Eric had.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the investors were smart enough to go, okay, let's get Eric together because intellectually he can keep up with those two guys.
Mm-hmm.
And then like magic happened. And now this is an outsider looking in because I knew Eric enough to know that when he went there, I anticipated that those founders at Google would find Eric just as engaging and as amazing as what I did as a young guy who was exposed to Eric and got to kind of like learn from him as a mentor.
Did you meet John Doerr? Have you met John Doerr?
I have met John Doerr.
And he's the guy who came up with the OKRs and everything for Google and all that type of stuff.
Yeah. So John Doerr, and by the way, between John Doerr, Larry, those guys, Eric. So I'd give Eric the credit around it not being a search engine company. It's an auction company. If you think about what that company did is you're not searching stuff. People are paying you to be at the top of the search.
Yeah.
Like those are the sorts of things that I think have Eric and granted Larry and Sergey, unbelievable, brilliant people. But yeah, John Doerr. Yeah. First, John is an amazing investor. He's also a super nice guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Seems like a super nice guy.
Yeah, like I'm 30 years old and I'm sitting in Kleiner's offices with Eric, fortunately. And like John's giving me advice and Vinod's giving me advice. I don't know if I fully appreciated the world I was sitting in back then.
That's unbelievable. So Eric leaves, you're running venture inside of Novell. And then you're like, now let's just launch Utah Ventures outside of this. And did you spin a fund out of Novell, or did you just start a whole new one?
No. So what happened there was at that point it became very apparent that Novell needed to focus on its core business.
Yeah.
When the venture fund is generating more cash than the product, you might want to think about something here. So I started talking to several venture funds.
Yeah.
We were LPs in the likes of NEA and Excel and Kleiner and Battery. And so I started kind of seeking advice from those guys. Jim Schwartz, founder of Excel Partners.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
He was an investor, an advisor to Utah Ventures and Jim Dreyfus, which started in 1986. I'm having breakfast with Schwartz at the Stein Erikson Lodge in Deer Valley.
Oh, wow.
And I'm kind of seeking some advice. I'm like, look, I'm talking to a fund in New York and one in the Valley, one up in Boston. And he goes, no, you need to go meet my friend Jim Dreyfus. I'm like, really? Like this? I knew Utah Ventures.
Yeah.
I go, it's a little tiny fund. He goes, no, go meet him. So I went and met with Jim. Then I called Rick Frisbee and Bob Barrett, who are the founders of Battery, called those guys on the phone. And they gave me some amazing advice. They said, look, you can go join a venture fund and you can be like the 15th or 16th partner in and you'll be fine. They knew Jim. They said, first of all, Jim's great. Second of all, Blake, it's like a startup. Jim had raised a couple funds, had just a small amount of money under management. And like that's your entrepreneurial journey. Go do that. So it was interesting. So Jim, that was right during the 2002 Winter Olympics.
Yeah.
And I called Jim on the phone, and we'd been talking about me joining him. And originally I thought I was going to get an offer from a firm back in New York. So I'm having this conversation with my wife one night. Keep in mind, this is like 2001, 2002. And she's now 30, but my oldest daughter, McCall, her bedroom was right across the hall from ours. And so she, unbeknownst to me, is listening to this conversation. I was fired up about moving to New York and I'm going to get this offer and just going to I'm going to run venture for this firm on the East Coast. I walk in to say goodnight to my then 10-year-old daughter and she's crying. And I'm like, all right, what's happened? Like the dad comes out in me. What's going on at school? And all she said to me was, I don't want to move.
Oh, wow.
There you go.
Decision made.
And I walked back into the bedroom and I looked at my wife. I'm like, I know what we need to do. And by the way, like if I were to stack rank my interests, Utah Ventures was low on the because I had this grandeur of going to New York. So I actually texted. I didn't text because it didn't exist back then.
Yeah.
I called Dreyfus on the phone. He said, hey, come see me. I'm downtown in the hospital.
Wow.
I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, just come on down. I'm like, really? So I'm like, okay. So I go down to Dreyfus, and he's getting his appendix out.
Oh my God.
So he and I sat in his hospital room, and we talked about me joining him. And he's like, hey, look, I get out of here. I'm take a week off. Let's reconnect. So he and I reconnect, and we go to lunch at Lone Star. Do you know Lone Star?
Yeah.
Lone Star, this little like hole in the wall, amazing Mexican place in Fort Union. And so we go have lunch there. We show up, and we order, and it's cash only. Neither one of us have cash.
Yeah.
We literally go out to our cars and dig change out of to pay for lunch.
That's right.
Keep in mind, we're managing hundreds of millions of dollars, and neither one of us have $10 to our name in cash. And that's how it came about.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is incredible. During this time, VSpring's around at this time, right?
So VSpring started right about the time that I joined Jim in 2002. Okay. And what was interesting is Jim had been the money behind Paul Alstrom's company.
Yeah.
He'd co-invested with Greg Warnock. You know, he and Dinesh were buddies. Mm-hmm. He knew Ed Ekstrom. So I think Jim actually talked to those guys. But yeah, VSpring started. VSpring Fund 1 was the same time. It was Utah Ventures Fund 3. And I joined Jim when he'd raised Fund 3 but had not deployed any capital.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So it's interesting you kind of just went, like most the Utah VCs, they can kind of trace their lineage to VSpring, but yeah, you just avoided that altogether. Well done.
I'm buddies with those guys.
Well, they've all gone on to do incredible things. In fact, Alstrom was right where you are just a week ago talking about the founding of VSpring and stuff like that. It's pretty fascinating.
Yeah,
actually.
no, I remember those guys put it together. Jim, I think Jim actually spent some time. I don't think Jim ever invested in VSpring as an LP, but we used to co-invest with those guys all the time.
Yeah, I remember. I think Paul mentioned that Jim was engaged in some way.
Jim was on Paul's board at Nolix, which was Paul's company before VSpring.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So what was the environment like in 2002?
In terms
2003.
of the venture industry?
For the venture industry.
So there was...
Mind you, Qualtrics is founded about this time too.
Yeah. Qualtrics, Pluralsight.
Pluralsight soon after, Omniture.
Yeah. So back up a little bit.
Ancestry, right?
Yeah, Ancestry was kicking around. It was Utah Ventures, VSpring just getting started, Wasatch, now Epic.
Yeah.
And that was kind of it. That was the lay of the land in terms of VC. We used to try to convince Silicon Valley firms to come to Utah. I gave away ski tickets, paid for hotel rooms just to get them to come look at companies. Yeah. It just didn't work. I was at Novell. We had invested in this company called NetObjects. Mm-hmm. NetObjects was going to buy mycomputer.com, which was the precursor to Omniture. And mycomputer.com's a public company. Internet bubble burst. Market cap of that company goes from like 1.5 billion to like 50 million in like a month. And we have to call Josh on the phone and say, dude, we can't buy your company. Yeah. Here's a great little lesson for everybody out there. The guy named Mike Zisman, who was one of the founders of Lotus, he was on the board of that company. And we had $1 million breakup fee with mycomputer.com. That $1 million was going to put NetObjects out of business. By the way, there was a public company. Mike Zisman said, we committed to that kid. We have the break. Send him the money. That was a great lesson for me. So we sent Josh the $1 million, and that was the bridge that helped him get to Omniture.
Yeah.
Roll forward. I'm sitting at the Market Street Grill with Josh. I'm having lunch with him. He's like, dude, $3 million, you can buy 30% of Omniture. I said, Josh, I don't have the guts to do this, man. I know where your skeletons are buried from the My Computer days. Sorry, man, I got to pass. And so when Omniture went public, I sent Josh a text and I said, hey, dude, congrats. And you can say I told you so all day long, man. I totally screwed that up and missed it. He sent me this great text back. He's like, dude, at least you told me why you didn't want to do it. You told me no, and you gave me the reasons why. I totally get it.
Yeah.
Roll forward. When he was doing Domo, I get a text from Josh saying, dude, you're the only one that told me I'm out. You're the only VC I'm letting in my Series A round. You want in? It was funny. I called my partners, and I'm like, hey, Josh is doing this. And they go, well, what does Domo do? I go, I don't know. Dreyfus and Carl Ledbetter said to me, that's Josh. Tell him we're in. There you go.
That's incredible.
So I fly to the Bay Area because Josh is out there raising money. And I meet with him on the patio of the Rosewood Hotel at the top of Sandhill Road.
Uh-huh.
And Josh and oh gosh, his CTO, I can see his face.
Pistana?
No. At Domo.
I'm not sure who that is.
I'll think about it in a minute. Anyway, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, all right, dude, at least tell me what you do. So he walked me through it. I'm like, all right, we're in.
Yeah.
And so for that round, he let a bunch of unbelievable angels and us in. I think we got in for a small amount of money, and I was always grateful for Josh. But that's my Omniture complete whiff and my Domo story.
Man, you got a 30% of Omniture.
Yeah, for $3 million. But this was before they'd kind of figured out that eBay analytics thing.
Uh-huh.
They had like this little widget, and like so Omniture was like it is a super early, and I think Josh was just looking for something. Now, look, I think this is where Mark Gornberg comes into play. Like, good for Gornberg, you know. So,
oh yeah, that's incredible. Who were some companies that you invested in early on through that first fund that you were a part of, but Utah Ventures' third fund?
Yeah, so there was this company in Silicon Valley called Riverbed Technologies. So Riverbed was a bandwidth optimization company.
Uh-huh.
And the first time I met the CEO, he said to me, hey, we speed data up faster than the speed of light. I'm like, oh, that's cool. You know you can't do that, but that's cool because physics will tell you can't do that.
Yeah.
And so it had us intrigued. The seed investors were Excel and Lightspeed.
Okay.
Two firms that I had invested in for Novell, so knew those firms really well. Jim Schwartz, my mentor, was on the board.
Schwartz is incredible, by the way. You know, he came out here when he didn't have to. I think he's first summit.
Yeah.
And really gave some credibility to Silicon Slopes Summit.
Yeah.
That otherwise I don't think we would have had.
Yeah.
Right. Like he was probably the biggest name that year.
You know what? Jim Schwartz, so first of all, I met him through Eric in the mid-90s. He's an amazing individual, unbelievable investor. Like that guy he has the magic touch. And you know, he was my mentor. And I still talk to Jim every now and then. You know, he's retired. He's doing other things now. But I attribute my success a lot to Dreyfus or to Schwartz because he taught me this business. I grew up under Jim Schwartz and a guy named Carl Ledbetter and Eric Schmidt, and Dreyfus was instrumental. So yeah, so that was the thing. But anyway, Riverbed. So we invest. This is my first check for Utah Ventures Fund 3, $4 million. One of the biggest checks we've ever written.
Oh, wow.
It's a $120 million fund. We invest into Riverbed. I go to my first board meeting, and the VP of engineering walks in to give us a report. Hey, we just started shipping the product. What this company did is the software was loaded onto Dell boxes, and it sped up data from point A to point B.
Yeah.
10 times faster than anybody else. And he goes, hey, our software runs so fast, we caught this data center on fire.
What?
And I'm thinking to myself, what the hell did I just do? On the break, I go in the bathroom and I throw up. Jim Schwartz walks in, sees what's happening. He puts my arm around me and he said, dude, you'll be fine. We're okay. Come to find out, this thing on Dell boxes, the fan couldn't keep up with how fast this thing ran the processor. And that they just fixed that problem and we're off to the races. That company's journey was, we invested before revenue, $22 million. We had an offer from Citrix to buy that company for $350 million.
Wow.
I'm thinking, wow, this is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, time frame 2005, 2006, and we turn it down. Once again, I'm like, what are we doing here, people? Jim Schwartz, once again. I listened to that CEO, Jerry Kennelly, who's an amazing individual, go, hey, I'm in this thing for the long run. We got a multi-billion-dollar company. So we turned him down. Goldman Sachs takes us public in 2007. $600 million IPO. That was a big one back then.
Yeah.
Before the lockup came off for us, $3 billion market cap.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. My $8 million, because $4 million initial check, then $8 million, returned nearly $200 million on a $120 million fund.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
How did you convince them, I guess through the connections, everything that you already had, but like for a fund called Utah Ventures to get in there early on?
Well, so there was a couple things. One was I did have Chris Sheppy at Lightspeed, Jim Schwartz at Excel, which I knew really well. And we're competing for the at the time those guys did the A, we were doing the B. We're competing for the B. So I fly out and I'm sitting at a restaurant right across the street from then it was called Pac Bell Stadium, but it's where the Giants play. Mm-hmm. I'm having dinner with Jerry Kennelly. And Jerry's like, okay, I like what you guys are doing. We're willing to do a couple things. One was we bought 12% of that company, which made Excel and Lightspeed happy because they wanted to buy more. So we made the math work for the existing investors. And he goes, all right, here's the issues I have with your term sheet. And I said, okay. And he said, I'm going to make a decision on Monday. This was like on Thursday because all these other firms I was competing with needed to have their partners meeting. Mm-hmm. So I go, give me 10 minutes. I got up from dinner, walked over to the corner of the restaurant, called Jim and Carl on the phone. Mm-hmm. I said, all right, guys, here's what's going on. And both of them were like, go back and tell him we'll accept those terms. So I went back down. I sat down with Jerry. I said, all right, dude, I'll make a change to the term sheet. I'll have it to you later tonight. I'll accept what you're asking me. He's like, done.
Oh, wow.
That's how the deal got done.
That's so cool. Oh, my gosh. Well, you mentioned something there where, like, you made the math work for the other funds. And my experience of you and the reputation you have is, like, it's the most collaborative venture capitalist, and you really, like, try to make sure everybody wins. It's probably why you're, like, the greatest Utah VC of all time, which I don't think people really realize. But Pelion is the greatest Utah fund
You're
ever.
very kind.
And you leading that makes you the greatest Utah VC of all time, and even beyond that. But you're very collaborative. Where did you get that from? Did you learn that from, like, Jim but because that's rare, as you know, that's rare even in this ecosystem.
Yeah, sharp elbows, and Jim was that way. Eric, that was one of the things that Eric, so one of the things when I was running Novell's corporate venture fund, what he told me was, you can't do a deal unless you get another venture fund in there. And I'm like, okay. And,
wow,
and like I remember thinking to myself, okay, how does that work? And so Red Hat, if you remember the company Red Hat, so Red Hat rolls around and there's Bill Kaiser from Greylock and Kevin Harvey from Benchmark. Mm-hmm. So for everybody listening, Greylock and Benchmark, two of the greatest funds in the galaxy.
Yeah, these names and companies you're saying are phenomenal.
Yeah.
It's actually crazy.
And so they're going to raise a new round of financing at Red Hat. And so I'd gotten to know these guys and we're kind of working the system, and I call them on the phone and I'm like, all right, we're in. I want $5 million. And they said to me, you can have $1 million.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, all right, like I kind of try to flex a little bit.
Yeah.
And Bill Kaiser and Kevin, both of them were amazing. They're like, Blake, let me walk you through the math here just for a second. Let me tell you what this is going to look like. This and keep in mind, this was the late 90s with Red Hat.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, but it's like a open source company that sells CDs and books. And like they taught me the vision of what was going on here. I was like, all right, can you give me 10 minutes? Sure. So I run down to Eric's office. I'm like, hey, this is what they're telling me. And he goes, go back and tell those guys we're in. And you know what? If you can get 2, fantastic. But don't lose this deal over $1 million.
Yeah.
So I go back, $1 million, we're in. 18 months later, the company goes public. That $1 million after lockup, worth $99 million. That was the start of the vision of, you know what, you got a great company, just get in.
Yeah.
And you know what, like with Jim Schwartz and Chris Sheppy with the Riverbed thing, we made the math work. Guess what? The next time I showed up, they're like, hey, he knows how to play well.
Yeah.
And so we tried to take that approach where, and it also works for the entrepreneurs. Like, I want the entrepreneurs to be like, I'm not trying to take such a big bite of the apple, and I'm not trying to like elbow somebody out, because it's this notion of, rising tides raise all boats.
Yeah.
So let's do that.
Yeah, the pie's not one size; it gets bigger.
Totally.
The pie gets bigger.
Yeah.
Which is super fascinating, and I think too often we think like, there's the pie. This is the pie. Now we got to split it exactly as it is.
Yeah.
It's never going to get bigger. Nothing's going to change, and yeah.
And like Fusion.io. We did Fusion.io, and our first check at Fusion.io,
enormous company for those listening out of the state of Utah.
Yeah, our first check was like $3 million, and I remember firms just like some of the local guys here kind of making fun of me, because I think our ownership was like 3% or 4%.
Yeah.
And my philosophy was, look, if these guys are right, if David Flynn and Rick White and those guys are right, what they're doing to solid state storage, dude, this is a massive company. Mm-hmm. Then we stepped in and we bought $1 million shares for $1 million in secondary shares, which turned into 30 when that company went public. But I think all total we had 6 into this company, and it was worth 80 when it went public.
Yeah.
It was once again, I'd rather own a little bit of an amazing business than a lot of a company that, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
So,
are they going to get there?
Yeah.
Did Fusion.io, am I remembering this correctly, that they got Woz? Did Woz come to?
Woz was there. Yeah.
Yeah, they got Steve Woz.
Yeah. I
to come to Fusion.io.
I remember meeting the Woz going, all right, dude, first of all, you're amazing. Second of all, I want to hear all about the Steve Jobs stories you have.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, Steve Wozniak was the co-founder at Apple with Steve Jobs. And like, I think it was David Bradford who actually got the Woz to come.
Yeah, it was.
And like, he shows up, and what he said to me was super interesting. He goes, what these guys have built is going to revolutionize storage software. He was there because of the tech. Mm. I'm like, all right, can I get more money into the deal?
That's incredible.
Oh, the Woz was amazing.
So, how come you think all the Utah funds missed Qualtrics? Isn't that an interesting thing?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if there may be Utah money in there. I have no idea. But my sense of it was like, we bootstrapped that thing until what, 13 or 14?
Yeah.
Somewhere around there.
Yeah.
So we bootstrapped it for over a decade before they took anything. Is it just because of that? Or like,
I'll speak to, I don't know about the other guys. I'll speak to us is, like I think people, and I know we were, they thought it was just like this little interesting survey tool. You had SurveyMonkey that was running around out there. And I think Ryan and what his dad Scott and his brother Jared were doing, like, these guys were just under the radar. They were just building. They were doing some interesting things. Scott, who actually I serve with on the UVU Board of Trustees. Dude's amazing, by the way. Yeah. If you guys don't know Scott Smith, you should, because that guy's pretty cool guy.
Yeah.
And I think they were just like building, and I think we just, the rest, at least us, we just kind of lost track of, it was not a survey company.
Yeah.
Now, granted, surveys were at the heart of it. It was an experience company.
Yeah.
And when I say experience, like, it provided people experiences. That's why we missed it, was I think we just like got it wrong.
Yeah.
100%. I've told this to Ryan a couple times. I'm like, dude, you killed it. You knocked it out of the park. And yeah, let me raise my hand to saying I totally missed that thing. And yeah, he kind of chuckled, and I was grateful that he like chuckled and didn't make fun of me, but because we totally missed it. But I think Pluralsight's in the same boat. Those companies just were under the radar, just building.
Yeah.
Like what Sconnard was doing was, it was kind of a education. Like, I don't think people fully appreciated what they were doing.
Yeah.
And I think, and then when they got ready to go raise, at least for us, both those businesses were just so far out of our strike zone in terms of size and shape. Having said that, if I'd have been given the opportunity, I'd have put money into both of them just because they're amazing individuals.
Well, they were like huge rounds. I remember like we just started Beehive Startups, I don't know, a little bit before these rounds. And I think Ryan went first and he calls me up. I just raised the largest venture round in Utah history.
Yeah.
Well, whoa, cool. It's like 135.
Yeah.
Wow, this is cool. And I get to like put this story out and like this will never happen again, ever.
Yeah.
How incredible is this? And then like a month later, Connor calls. I just raised the largest venture round in 140.
Yeah.
Why is that number like so close to 135?
I love the $5 million delta there, Scottard. Way to go, Aaron.
And then, of course, Josh, 5 months later, hey, I just raised the biggest one. It's like over 200.
Yeah.
And then it's just been off to the races.
Well, you know, Excel did Qualtrics. Wasn't it Excel that did Qualtrics?
Yeah, it was Excel.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I get
that's how we got Jim Schwartz, actually.
Yeah. So Schwartz calls me on the phone. And he's like, dude, my partners want to do this deal. What do you know about this Ryan Smith kid? I go, Jim, Ryan's great.
Yeah.
And like it was a 2-minute conversation. I think the deal was like already done. Like I think Jim was just, he was in Park City and I needed to buy him lunch or something. I don't know. Yeah. But then I'm thinking to myself, all right, could we cram some money in at the tail end? And I thought, you know what? The best thing we can do is just cheer Ryan on and Scott and Jared. Like those guys, they deserve exactly, what they got in terms of that was just an amazing and really kind of a bellwether thing for the state. That was one of those great epiphany events for the state.
It was a huge year. 2014 was a huge year.
Yeah,
where
massive.
We started getting like national attention. I remember there was some article, I can't remember the publication, where it's like, on this street in Provo, Utah, there's 3 unicorns.
Yeah.
Right?
Totally.
It was like crazy. It's like, wow, this is crazy. This is super fun.
I know it.
At what point did you get introduced to Cloudflare?
Yeah, so good question. So Matthew Prince and a guy named Ben Dahl, who was an intern for us, went to Roland Hall together. They went to elementary school and junior high together. And so Ben was working for us, and Matthew was at Harvard, Matthew Michelle, and a guy named Lee Holloway. And they were entering a business plan competition. And so they call Ben and Matthew had started a company together called Unspam, which failed. But he called Ben on the phone. He's like, hey, dude, I'm doing this thing. I'd love like just some critical. I want to win the business plan competition.
Yeah.
So that's how we first got introduced to the business. And then my partner, Carl Ledbetter, who Carl's background, PhD in math. He worked with Eric at Sun Microsystems. He'd actually been a CEO to a Excel Sequoia. So he had Jim Schwartz and Don Valentine on his board. Think about that for just a minute, those two guys. And so Carl was like this, like what he understood was zeros and ones and the cybersecurity space. And so we're all kind of sitting around, and there's me and Dreyfus, Carl, Chad Packard was I think he'd just come from being an intern to an associate, Chris Cooper, Ben Dahl, and we kind of got it, and we're like kind of all looking at each other, and we're like, all right, like they're talking about this thing being a firewall in the cloud.
Yeah.
And if you remember Checkpoint, it was like, okay, that's an interesting company, but it was backed by Venrock. Ray Rothrock was involved. Mm-hmm. We're like, okay, so we think this thing will be like a couple $100 million business. We'll sell it to Symantec or Checkpoint or something like that. And Carl's like, no, here's what this company is.
Oh, wow.
This company, and Matthew had said to us, he's like, I'm going to power the internet. Like that was his big vision. You know, remember Faster Than the Speed of Light from Jerry Kennelly? like Matthew was like, I'm going to power the internet. And I'm like, how are you going to do that, man? That's huge. Well, Carl stood up in front of us on a whiteboard, and he like explained to us how he's going to power the internet. We're like, all right. So they're raising $2 million, and we're going to do $1 million of it. Dreyfus knows
this is their first round.
This is their first round,
yeah.
Series A. Dreyfus knows Venrock really well because Venrock was one of the original LPs in Utah Ventures in 1986. He had a guy named Tony Evnan, who was one of the senior guys, as an advisor. So Ray Rothrock does Checkpoint. So he calls Ray Rothrock on the phone. We introduce Ray to the company. $2 million raise. We're going to do $1 million. Ray's going to do $1 million at a $6 million post-money valuation.
Oh, my gosh, dude.
Well, Ray comes back to us and he goes, hey, I need to be the biggest investor. I want to do 1.2. So we get $800,000. So in Carl's wisdom, we get a super pro rata built into this thing. So in the next round, we bought from 13% to 20% in the next round of financing.
Oh, my heck.
So we own 20% of that company when it went public.
Is that your biggest win?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, Cloudflare is
Totally.
And he did. He powered the internet.
He does. I mean, Matthew lives in Park City. He's amazing. Michelle actually, so Ben Lambert and Chad Packard actually teach a class down at BYU, and they get Michelle to come in and speak as one of their guest speakers every semester.
Oh, really?
She's kind of the Cloudflare whisperer is how you want to describe. Michelle's amazing. I think we've tried to actually get her to come to Silicon Slopes a couple times. I don't know if she ever made it out.
I think we've had Matthew at something. I can't remember. But yeah, there was. Yeah, I think we've tried.
Yeah.
I can't remember either.
We did the rough math. That first $800,000 check when Cloudflare went public was worth $800 million. Now it took a decade to have that happen.
That's absurd.
Dude, it's crazy. It's so crazy.
That's the most insane thing ever.
Yeah. So Carl joins the board. It was interesting. We all kind of sat around and like I had the heaviest board load.
Uh-huh.
So I was like, dude, it can't be me. Jim's like, I'll do it. I'm like, Jim, you're not a cybersecurity guy.
Mm-hmm.
And so like Carl, it only makes sense. One, you're a cybersecurity guy. Two, you've been a CEO before.
Mm-hmm.
You've worked for Jim Schwartz and Don Valentine. So like your impact on Matthew is going to be pretty amazing. And like, first of all, Matthew loved Carl. Carl's still on that board today.
That's
even though Carl's transitioned from a GP to an LP for us, and he's an advisor to us. He's actually in the process of mentoring a couple of our younger guys. But yeah, Carl still sits on the board. But it took 10 years to get there.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So Scott Sandell came in on the Series B, led that. That's NEA.
Uh-huh.
And then like it just went from there, and yeah. So I joke with Ben Dahl all the time. I'm like, dude, glad you went to elementary school with Matthew Prince, but man, it would have been amazing if you'd gone to elementary school with Mark Zuckerberg as well. Like that would have been cool. Dahl's great.
What do you think of the power that Cloudflare has? Like they can really kind of decide if you can be on the internet or not, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And he's been in the middle of things, right? Not him, not Matthew himself, but the company. It's like, why are you powering X website? Why are you powering X website? And it's like, wow, I think of Cloudflare is more like a utility than like getting caught up in those types of things.
Yeah.
You know,
Matthew's a constitutional lawyer. So that, that's what he graduated from law school. And from the very beginning, Matthew had kind of two things. One is we're not going to build this business by selling ads. So he didn't want to do that. Mm-hmm. And two, that regulating who can be on, like who should regulate the internet, it should not be a single entity. And so that's why he's powered. So there are customers on Cloudflare's platform that are extremely bad actors.
Mm-hmm.
There's some amazing people, but like if the government wants to legislate that stuff and government wants to control that stuff, you shouldn't have, and this is always from day one was Matthew's opinion, is it should not be a single company, it should not be a single person that regulates that. And so that's always been. Now, I've watched him and listened to him. Like there's been some really rough things where people have said like some terrible, terrible things because of people who have been customers.
Yeah.
And he does not disagree with any of that about how terrible that. But is it really the job of that technology, really the job of Cloudflare to make those decisions?
It's like when you start going down that road where he just gets to decide who does and doesn't get to have a voice. It's kind of interesting.
It's a slippery slope.
It's like, I mean, Zuck talks about this all the time, right? He's like, you want me to decide if these people can post things or not?
Totally.
That's crazy. You know, that's too much power for one person. Like governments don't even have that power.
Right. And, and that was Matthew's view from day one. And we always really appreciated that. Now, that company went like 4 years before they generated any revenue.
Really?
And we're just like, holy cow, what's going on here? What's going on here? But look, the whiteboard session with Carl about powering the internet, Matthew's bold statement about I will power the internet, or this company will power the internet. I'm just super grateful that, one, we were an investor, that came into our shop, and like if you know how Pelion works, like we're very much a team sport.
Mm-hmm.
Like we think that's how teams win. And so, Dahl found the company. He went to, he was buddies with Matthew. Chris and Ben and myself and Chad, like the whole team dove in on diligence, and then it just made the most sense for Carl to be the board member. And like all of us have our fingerprints all over that thing. And that's just philosophically how we think about the world.
Yeah, that's interesting. What do you think of the state of venture capital right now in Utah?
That's a great question. I think it's interesting in general.
Yeah.
I think there's lots of really good things that are happening in the state of Utah. I think there's a lot of great firms. My friends run those firms.
Yeah, sure.
I'm actually... because guys like Jim Schwartz and Bob Pavey from Morgenthaler and Dick Cramlett, founder of NEA, and all those guys were LPs in our fund in my early days. I'm actually a little tiny LP in a lot of the guys here in town.
Yeah.
And I made the decision years ago to say, if I'm ever in a position, it's the pay it forward idea. Yeah. It's what I learned from Jim Schwartz. So I'm an LP in a bunch of the guys here in town. I think they're great. But, if you look the last year, of the only 26% of the capital that was invested in the state of Utah came from local funds.
Yeah.
So it's still very much an undercapitalized market.
Mm-hmm.
But you have, we introduced Neighbor, one of our companies, to Jeff Jordan over at Andreessen Horowitz.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff he talked at Silicon Slopes.
Yeah.
That was the first investment Andreessen made in Utah. So like getting these guys to come. So I think
it's not a bad thing for sure.
No, it's wonderful. Scott Sandell has been Divvy. This is NEA, Divvy, and Fusion.io.
Yeah.
Insight has been Divvy, Bessemer, like all these guys, Axel, Sequoia, they're all doing stuff here. So I think it's amazing. I'm still of the opinion that we can be better. I'll just say the local guys, and I'm including Pelion there. We can be better to collaborate, but maybe that's just me. I'm very much a collaborative guy.
Yeah.
Like we absolutely compete, and we should.
Sure.
Like that's healthy for the entrepreneurs, but I think we also should be collaborating. Tyler and Sterling started this thing. You might have seen it, this Build Utah thing.
Love it.
And I remember when they laid that out to me. And it was less about highlighting Pelion or more about the celebration of entrepreneurship. So if you notice on those billboards, some of them are portfolio companies, some of them are not. And that's we're just all about, and I just think that's healthy.
Yeah.
Clint, I think what Silicon Slopes, like your mission and what you guys have done here, I think have been so bringing us together. Like I tell people, Silicon Slopes is the center of the universe for us.
Really?
Yeah, that's how I describe you guys when people ask me, so what should I do? I was like, go attend this, do this, but this is where it all starts. And I love the community component. So I think we as VCs should always keep that forefront of mind. Is like, one, we should compete. That's healthy. But two, I'm a collaboration guy.
Yeah. One thing that I think you intuitively understand as an investor and as a VC is that the entrepreneur should be at the center of the community. The entrepreneur should be leading the community, like the Ryans and the Sconards and the Joshes and the Blake Murrays and the Eric Rays. I mean, we could go on and on, like the names. Like they're at the heart. They're leading the community, right?
Totally.
And like all the rest of us, we're here just to support.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I remember sitting in Greylock's offices, and at the time, Bill Kaiser was running the firm, and all he talked about was the entrepreneurs are the rock stars. Because if you think about it for just a minute, being a CEO is the loneliest job on the planet.
Yeah.
Think about a VC. We make 40 investments. We got a bucket of, we have diversification.
Mm-hmm.
Entrepreneur, you got one.
Yeah.
If it fails, you're done.
Yeah.
Like that, I'm just amazed by all of those guys that we rattled off. right there. You know, I was just texting with Blake Murray on some things last night and talking to him on the phone about some things. You know, my wife sends out like 400 Christmas cards every year. And I was looking at the list this last Christmas. She's still sending Christmas cards to guys I backed in the 90s. And it's all about that. They are like, you're spot on. Like, that's who should be, you know, we can go down the list. It's Blake Murray. It's Brandon Rodman. It's Sconnard. It's Ryan, Josh, Eric Ray. Like, first of all, sorry, guys. I know I'm missing a whole bunch of you out there. A whole bunch of them. So I want everybody to understand that. But, like, I'm just amazed. I mean, there's some young entrepreneurs out there that are building amazing things.
Yeah. So, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Another question I would have for you is, what makes a good investor? What makes a good VC? Because I've seen you even recruit people to your team, like Jeff Curl, more recently with Tyler and Sterling and these types of people. These are all different folks, different backgrounds, different philosophies, different ways. Like, what in your experience, and even the people you've mentioned, the legends of VC, they all had different backgrounds.
Yeah.
What makes a good VC?
So I think about what makes a good VC, like I think about what makes a great basketball team for just a minute. You know, just use John Stockton and Karl Malone. Everybody remembers those guys. First of all, Stockton, what he did, amazing. But do you want John Stockton playing power forward?
Exactly.
No.
Yeah.
You know, the Bulls. Yeah. Now, Michael Jordan probably could have played whatever he wanted to, but it is what it is. Yeah. And so when I think about a great VC, you have to have a degree of humility. You have to have good instincts. You have to be a trust builder.
Yeah. Like,
think about that. You have to build trust with an entrepreneur. You have to build trust with people who invest in us. You have to build trust with the community. You have to be a hustler.
Yeah.
And if you can't, if you're waiting for things to come to you, you'll self-select yourself out. Mm-hmm. So you have to kind of and you have to be very vulnerable.
Yeah.
And you also have to be a little bit like a defensive back in football. You're going to get burnt for a touchdown on a play, and then guess what? You get to run back out there and do it again. So you got to like failure. You got to be okay with failure.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I think about like all of those sorts of things, I start by saying, as an individual, you got to have great instincts, great trust building. You have to have a network. You have to be able to engage. You have to be positive.
Yeah.
Like, you got to be kind. You got to be willing to make really hard decisions that are unpopular.
Yeah.
Like, they look at me like, sometimes I'll be in the middle of something. They're like, how do you do this? And I'm like, we got a fiduciary, man. You got to make a really hard decision. And sometimes it affects, like, that's the sucky part about our job, is when you make decisions that affect people's lives, that's terrible. But then if you think that being a lone wolf is the way to succeed, it's the team.
Yeah.
You know what? Mark Eaton had a role on the Jazz that was amazing.
Yeah.
He was an all-star.
You
know, roll forward. Look at the guys today.
Yeah.
Like what Ryan has put together there, you know, it's amazing.
How sweet is it that Ryan owns the Jazz?
Dude, that's amazing.
It's still like kind of unbelievable.
Totally. You know, I kind of joke. We'll be sitting and I'm like, you know what? The island of misfit toys, that's success. Everybody's got to look a little bit different, because guess what? If we all look the same, there's a reason why Curl and Sterling and Chad and Ben and Tyler and Chris, there's a reason they all look different, because if we all look the same.
Yeah. Ryan told me once, he's the parents left town and they left us the house keys. What do we want to do with it? Well, let's buy the Jazz, I guess.
Yeah, I know. I remember texting with Ryan when that happened. I was like, dude, this is going to be amazing. How did you convince Gail to do that?
Yeah. He did it at Tech Summit. Did you know that? He pulled her aside in the backstage at Tech Summit, and that kind of started it. And perfect timing for them. And I hope the Millers bring in a baseball team.
I was talking to Steve Starks the other day, and they're just so fired up about that. And I think through all of this, now this is my opinion. People can disagree. I think Ashley, Ryan's wife, had as much or more of a role in the buying of the Jazz
That's what Ryan says.
as Ryan. I mean, that's,
Yeah.
I don't know Ashley as well as I know Ryan, but just kind of watching and interacting, knowing Gail, I just think that was the magic that no one really understands,
Sure.
but I just want to highlight that one.
For sure.
Yeah.
Ryan says they don't get it without her.
Yeah.
For sure. Which is, how do you keep your ego, going back to what makes a good VC, how do you keep your ego in check both ways? Obviously, like, you have an enormous win like Cloudflare or something that's just like venture capital history type of a deal, right? And then you have losses too, right? That are like, man, we really thought this one was going to be. So how do you like not let the hits really bring you down, and how do you not let the highs just not get you too high?
You know, I grew up on a farm in Idaho, and I'll tell you a quick little story here. So when I was like, I don't know, 21 or something like that, and no, I was a senior in high school. I was 18, and before I was headed off to college. And for those of you who are familiar with farming, we're subject to weather.
Yeah.
And I'm swathing hay, so I'm cutting hay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the swather, and it's August, and I look, and down from the canyon comes these big black clouds. It's 90 degrees outside. Black clouds are going to show up. I know what's going to happen. We're going to get hailed on.
Mm-hmm.
If you get hailed on as a farmer, that wipes you out.
Yeah.
And the way farmers work is you take out an operating loan, you farm, you pay the operating loan. If you get wiped out, that's how farmers go bankrupt.
That's it. That's the game.
And so I'm watching this, and 30 minutes later, this hailstorm opens up. It wipes out our hay, our wheat, our barley. Like, we're cooked.
Yeah.
We're done. And, me being an 18-year-old kid, I was going to buy not a new car. I was going to buy a used car, but it was going to be a cool car. I was going to get a Trans Am back in the 80s. That was cool. So all you guys who are now chuckling and laughing over my Trans Am, come see me next time. That was a cool car back then.
Oh, for sure.
And I'm like, we're done. And so I get off the swather, and I drive to the house, call my dad on the phone, and he's like all laughing and joking. He's like, well, dude, what are you doing? Get back. I said, Dad, you need to come home. I go, we just got held out. He goes, he's like 10 miles away. Yeah. It's sunny. He drives out. I meet him in the field. He walks out in the field with me, and I don't know what we're going to do. Like, we're done.
Yeah.
And my dad just turned to me and he said, son, we'll figure it out. And so I remember that story where you can go, by the way, we were going to have like an amazing bumper crop.
Yeah.
And it got taken away from us in the matter of 30 minutes. I keep that story at the heart of everything I do, because you know what? You can have Cloudflare and you can be full of yourself, but let's be honest with you. Matthew Prince, Michelle, like those guys did what that was. And you know what? It only takes a 30-minute hailstorm and you're toast. And that's how I try to keep it. And then I have an amazing wife and children who are more than happy to help me keep my ego in check.
That's incredible. So what do you make of these? Like, we're seeing a lot of syndicate funds pop up. Do you think that's because of like AngelList? Did they make that popular? Like, we're seeing a good number of these pop up in Utah.
Yeah, I think part of it is, look, raising a fund is hard.
Yeah.
And first-time funds, you don't get institutional investors.
Yeah.
And I think as individuals, first of all, up until probably 12 months ago, there was a lot of wealth in Utah.
Yeah.
I don't think there's as much as there once was. Yeah. And so it's like everybody wants to get in on the next hot deal. And so you got some smart guys, wonderful people, know them well, that started putting together these syndicate, these SPVs, and they started doing deals. We got them in a couple of our companies. So I think you had that.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how that plays out, where interest rates are where they are. We're in a bear market, like all that kind of stuff. People aren't as flush with cash as what they once were. So we'll see what it is. But I think it was as much that, where it was, people don't want to be an LP. Maybe they can't get access to a fund, so they do this. They're able to pick and choose. A lot of these guys that come into these syndicate funds are entrepreneurs themselves, so they want a little bit more control of it.
For sure.
That's how I think about it.
Yeah.
And I think they, at least as near as I can tell, I think they've done pretty well.
No, yeah, I think they're doing well too. And like, who is it? Jason Calacanis kind of like has really perfected that model. At least that's the one that I look at. It's like, wow, he's really done quite well for himself. Yeah. Also, when you invest in Uber, you kind of don't have to do anything else.
Exactly. You know, Curl was an early angel investor in Uber. so when I asked him to come join us, I'm like, now I just want to be real clear. I need you to hustle, man. And he started laughing. He goes, I didn't have that kind of money in Uber.
That's incredible. So my follow up to that is like on the Syndicate front is like, because we talked about the state of venture capital in Utah, right? And how we're viewing it currently and how you view it. What do you think overall? Like the state of VC overall seems a little bit precarious.
It's completely precarious right now. You know, valuations. You know, I've seen this when the internet bubble burst. I saw it when the financial crisis melted down. I had, you know, some of these names that I just rattled off that were big mentors after the internet bubble burst. I remember sitting in a room with a couple of them. It's like, well, all the tourists have left, and I kind of chuckled, and I don't think I fully appreciated. But you know, you had the hedge fund guys that were coming in to Series A. And so you just had like all that chaos that was going on. We did a bunch of research the other day. I guess it's been a while ago. So if you look over the last 2 years, deal count on Series A, it's about the same. So that state, now valuations are probably down, but you know, when you talk about valuations being down, you know, so if instead of raising at 30, maybe you're raising at 20. But Series B and later, down by 77% from a deal count standpoint. So there's a ton of money sitting on the sidelines. Yeah. And I think part of that is, you know, companies got financed at such big valuations that, you know, just when we got, you know, the pig through the snake with the financial crisis meltdown, we got to get another pig through the snake again. So that's how I kind of think about it. But having said that, look, when the steam engine was created, a lot of innovation. You know, the industrial age was formed. You know, roll forward, internet bubble burst. Best vintage years for venture were 02, 03, 04. Yeah. Guess what? Our Cloudflare fund, an 04 vintage year fund. We'll take it. Yeah. Or no, that was the Riverbed fund. Yeah. Cloudflare was an 07. But that was right after the financial 07, 08, 09. I think that we're going through, like, this is a repeatable cycle because what we do know is entrepreneurs are amazing. Cash is king. So you got that, you know, people aren't spending the way they looked. But like, there's a lot of chaos out there.
Well, the wrinkle in all of this is AI, right?
Totally.
It's like, how does this change everything?
Right.
And like, what's vaporware, what's not is kind of interesting now too. Because it's not like the Web3 stuff where it was like, man, a lot of this is crazy. I don't even really understand it. Like, AI is real. It's going to transform everything. Yeah. That makes all the sense in the world. But yeah, like to be in this downtime and have this revolutionary technology come at the same time, that feels like a recipe for incredible.
So you hit on something. If you look at the internet bubble bursting, the internet in general, prior to that, like, now granted, the DARPANet's been around since, because the University of Utah was, but the commercialization of the internet didn't happen until 01, 02, 03, where people realized that it was what they could do with it. There's a sea change. When you think about when the financial crisis melted down, it was cloud computing. Yeah. Cloud computing was the big sea change. Like, Amazon was a bookseller. Yeah. They're not what they are today. You hit on it. I think the big sea change with technology, by the way, AI has been around forever, but ChatGPT, all that generative AI, there's a big sea change. So you can look at those last two and then you can look at this one. Yeah. What they have in common is a market meltdown, but a transformative technology in the internet and in cloud. Today, the transformative is artificial intelligence. Now, there will be a bunch of money lit on fire around AI, but I think that thing is just going to be another one of those big transformative technology.
How's Utah doing in the AI space, do you think?
Oh, I think they're doing amazing. Yeah. I think there's going to be a bunch of money that's going to get lost there in Utah and in California and all over the place. Yeah, for sure. No, I think that first of all, Utah entrepreneurs are scrappy. They're hungry. I love they got a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. They got to prove some things.
Yeah.
Look, we see that. We talked about Ryan and Josh and Sconner and those guys. They all grew up with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder.
Sure.
I mean, Josh had something to prove.
Josh
Pastana had
Josh
something to
has
prove.
A chip on his shoulder right now.
Totally. like, you know, I mean, Ryan owns the Jazz, still got a chip on his shoulder. Like, that's
Absolutely.
amazing. That's what you love about those guys.
Yeah,
That's what
absolutely.
So I think that we are primed to be a leader in AI. We're seeing some amazing early stage AI companies right now.
Yeah.
We're seeing some crazy ones too.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, there's some companies that were like, hey, they were a Web3 company, and now they're an AI company.
Oh.
Like, wow, that's like Whiplash.
Totally.
That's crazy.
One of our portfolio companies, 6 months ago, the word AI wasn't even in their board deck. We just looked at it last week. The whole thing is AI. By the way, they're killing it. So
Yeah, super smart. That's
Have at it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You still have like passion and energy for this after all these years, which I find fascinating. And like I said, like you're in the Silicon Slopes Hall of Fame, and we will literally put you in the Silicon Slopes Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
But like in terms of like, I think you're the greatest Utah VC to ever come out of the state. How much longer do you do it? How do you keep this? Like, why do you keep going? This is actually something I keep asking, like the Joshes of the world or the Ryans. What are you doing? Why aren't you just on a beach somewhere?
You know, my wife asks me all the time. She said, first of all, you can't retire until you get a hobby. and so I've really been like thinking about that. Like, I don't play golf. I play it, but I'm terrible at it. You know, dude, I love what I do.
Yeah.
Like I you know, I might get some of my LPs, they'll yell at me. I can't believe people pay me to do this for a living. This is amazing.
Yeah.
Like I was just sitting with like a 20-something-year-old entrepreneur the other day, and he was telling me about he was doing it. Like, I was fired up listening to him talk about it, what he's doing. So, dude, I love what I'm doing. I love being involved in the whole Silicon Slopes ecosystem. I know where I sit is, you know, part of my job is that pay it forward component. Jim Schwartz told me that early on. He goes, you have a responsibility. And so part of what I want to do and want to communicate to all of those guys out there, all of the men and women that are out there starting great companies, is do it. But think about how you can pay back. I actually think that Todd Peterson has figured that one out.
Yeah.
Like, I loved his speech where it's like he stood up there at the Hall of Fame or the awards banquet or whatever it was, and he challenged everybody. Okay, what are you doing philanthropic?
Yeah.
Like, my wife is out leading out for us on that front, and so that's a long-winded way to say, it's like, dude, I'm having more fun than I've like, this is amazing.
That's incredible.
And the people I get to hang out with are like, they might not want to hang out with me because I'm like this old bald guy, but I love hanging out with them.
Well, thanks, man. Thanks for everything you've done for Utah, seriously, and everything you've done for the ecosystem. Appreciate you coming on too.
Dude, thanks for having me. Thanks for including me in all you do. I'm the privileged guy. Thank you.
You bet. Thanks, brother.
All right.